I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. Not the specific thing. The specific thing is mine, and this practice will teach you that the specific thing can remain yours forever, whatever that may be. I'm going to tell you what happened around the thing, the container, not the contents. A few years ago, I was carrying something. Not a weight you could see, not a limp, not a bruise, not anything that showed up on a scan, but my body knew. I was getting headaches 3 times a week. My sleep was fractured. Awake at 3 in the morning with a chest full of unnameable static stress. Then I found out about a study from 1986. A psychologist at Southern Methodist University named James Pennebaker had asked college students to write about the most traumatic experience of their lives for 15 minutes a day, 4 days in a row. No one would read it. They could burn it afterward. The only instruction was to go deep, deepest thoughts, deepest feelings, and not hold back. The students who wrote about trauma went to the health center over the next 6 months at roughly half the rate of students who'd written about superficial topics. Half, just from writing, for only 15 minutes, for 4 days. I thought, I don't have to tell anyone. I just have to tell the page. So I sat down with a notebook and a timer. I set it for 15 minutes, and I wrote. But I won't tell you what I wrote. But I will tell you this. By day 3, the headaches had started to lift. By day 4, I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. Not because I'd cured myself, but because the thing I'd been carrying had finally been put somewhere. It had been given form, words, a narrative. And once it had a shape, my body stopped trying to scream about it through headaches and insomnia and phantom chest tightness. That's the power of expressive writing. And today I'm going to teach it to you. The full protocol, the science, the cultural roots, and a guided practice you can start tonight. I'm Sarah, and this is Ritual Friday on the Wired Ape, where every Friday we take one specific ritual or practice, deliver the complete picture, and by the end of the episode, you can try it immediately and understand exactly why it works. Today's practice is expressive writing, specifically the Pennebaker protocol, the most studied writing intervention in the history of psychology. Over 200 peer-reviewed studies across 4 decades, replicated in populations ranging from college students to cancer patients, from prison inmates to people with HIV, AIDS, from laid-off workers to trauma survivors. The overall effect size across more than 100 studies averages about 0.16 Cohen's d, modest but consistent across an extraordinary range of outcomes. This episode pairs directly with Wednesday's Scholars Fire on the Bluefield Project in Grief as Science. Wednesday explored the theory, how unprocessed emotional experience lodges in the body and the brain. Today delivers the practice, a ritual for processing what hasn't been processed, using nothing but a pen and 15 minutes. Here's the Wired Ape frame. Humans evolved as narrative creatures. Our brains are not filing cabinets that store raw data. They're storytelling machines that organize experience into coherent narratives with causation, chronology, perspective, and meaning. When a traumatic or deeply emotional experience can't be narrated because it's too overwhelming, too shameful, too secret, or too chaotic to fit into a story, it remains stored in the brain as fragmented sensory and emotional data, images, body sensation, surges of feeling without context. These fragments keep the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, on alert because they haven't been filed. They haven't been given a narrative structure that the hippocampus, the brain's memory organizer and narrative constructor, can process and integrate. Expressive writing forces the construction of that narrative. It moves fragmented emotional data from unstructured amygdala storage into structured hippocampal narrative. It gives the unspeakable a shape, and once it has a shape, the body relaxes. That's not metaphor, that's mechanism. In 1983, James Pennebaker, then a young professor at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, ran what he later described as a horribly underpowered experiment with a graduate student named Sandy Beal. The question was simple. What happens to the body when people write about things they've been keeping secret? Pennebaker's backstory matters. He'd been studying the health consequences of emotional inhibition, the work of actively suppressing or concealing significant emotional experiences. His earlier research had found that people who experienced trauma and kept it secret were more likely to develop health problems. The mechanism seemed to be that holding a secret requires chronic physiological effort, a sustained activation of stress response systems that, over time, wears the body down. Suppression isn't free. It costs cortisol, primary stress hormone, immune resources, and cardiovascular strain. The logical hypothesis followed. If keeping a secret is unhealthy, then revealing the secret should improve health. But Pennebaker, a social psychologist, was cautious about asking people to disclose secrets to another person. The social risks were too high, so he asked them to write. The protocol was elegant in its simplicity. Students were randomly assigned to one of two groups. The experimental group wrote for 15 minutes a day, 4 consecutive days, about the most traumatic or upsetting experience of their lives. The instruction, in Pennebaker's own words, was, write about your deepest thoughts and feelings about that experience. It should be something that has affected you very deeply. Ideally, something you have not talked about with others in detail. Let yourself go and touch those deepest emotions and thoughts. The control group wrote for the same duration about superficial topics, describing the room they were in, their shoes, their schedule. Then Pennebaker did something that set the study apart from typical psychology research. He tracked objective physical health outcomes, not just self-reported mood, not just questionnaire scores, actual visits to the Student Health Center, verified against medical records, over the following 6 months. The results: students in the expressive writing group visited the health center at roughly half the rate of the control group, half, from 4 days of 15-minute writing sessions. 2 years later, Pennebaker collaborated with immunologists Jan Kilkoltz-Glaser and Ron Glaser. This replication didn't just track health center visits, it measured immune function directly through the blastogenic response of T lymphocytes, white blood cells that are central to the adaptive immune system. Participants who wrote about emotional experiences showed improved immune system functioning compared to controls. The body wasn't just reporting feeling better, it was measurably defending itself more effectively. Since that first study in 1986, the Pennebaker paradigm has been replicated in over 200 studies. The documented benefits include reduced healthcare visits, decreased blood pressure in people with hypertension, reduced pain and fatigue in fibromyalgia patients, improved immune markers in people living with AIDS, faster wound healing in older adults, 67% in the writing group versus 42% in controls after 11 days, improved GPA, grade point average, in students, faster reemployment after layoff, reduced symptoms of PTSD, decreased anxiety and depression, and improved working memory capacity. 15 minutes, 4 days, pen and a page. The cultural lineage. This is ancient. Now, Pennebaker didn't invent the practice of processing emotional experience through structured language. He measured it. The practice itself is as old as human consciousness. Across virtually every indigenous culture, from Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime narratives to Western griot traditions to Native American oral histories, the communal telling and retelling of difficult experiences serves a specific psychological function. The story isn't just entertainment, it's processing. The narrator constructs a coherent account. The community witnesses it. The experience moves from private, fragmented, unbearable weight to shared, structured, meaningful narrative. The Navajo healing ceremony called the Beauty Way involves the patient telling the story of their illness within a structured ritual container with songs, sand paintings, and community presence over multiple days. The narrative is the medicine. The structure is the dosage. In Jewish tradition, the ethical will, or savah, is a document in which a person writes their deepest values, life lessons, and emotional legacies to their descendants. Unlike a legal will, which distributes property, the ethical will distributes meaning. It requires the writer to confront their most significant life experiences, extract their essence, and give them narrative form. It's expressive writing directed not just at processing the past, but at transmitting wisdom to the future. The tradition dates back to at least the 12th century and was practiced by Jewish communities across Europe and the Middle East. It is structurally identical to what Pennebaker asked participants to do. Sit down, confront your deepest experiences, and give them language. Stoic journaling. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, one of the foundational texts of Western philosophy, is at its core a personal practice journal. He wrote it for himself, often at night in his military tent during the Marcomannic Wars, processing the day's challenges, fears, and emotional responses through structured reflections. The meditations follow a pattern remarkably similar to Pennebaker's protocol. Confrontation of difficult experience. Today I faced ingratitude, cruelty, dishonesty, emotional engagement, honest acknowledgement of frustration or pain. Aurelius wasn't doing journaling as a wellness trend. He was surviving the psychological demands of leading an empire during plague and war. by forcing his fragmented experiences into narrative structure every night for years. The convergence across these traditions is the Wired Ape thesis in action. Human beings across every culture and era have independently discovered that giving language to emotional experience produces healing, not because language is magical, because the brain requires narrative structure to produce and integrate emotional memory. And when it doesn't get that structure, the body carries the cost. Some appropriation considerations. Indigenous oral storytelling traditions are communal practices embedded in specific cultural, spiritual, and relational contexts. They are not equivalent to individual journaling and should not be collapsed into a writing exercise. The Wired Ape references these traditions to honor the deep human lineage of narrative processing, not to extract or decontextualize sacred practices. We encourage listeners to engage with these traditions respectfully and, where appropriate, through relationship with the communities that hold them. Why does writing about painful experiences improve physical health? There are 4 mechanisms. First mechanism is that inhibition, release, and autonomic load reduction. Pennebaker's original theory was grounded in the physiology of suppression. When you actively inhibit a significant emotional experience, holding a secret, avoiding thoughts about a trauma, presenting a public face that contradicts your internal state, that inhibition requires sustained physiological effort. The sympathetic nervous system stays partially activated to maintain the suppression. Cortisol remains elevated. Immune resources are diverted from pathogen defense to managing the chronic low-level stress of holding back. Writing about the suppressed experience releases the inhibition. The secret is externalized. It exists on the page now, not only in the body. The physiological effort of holding it back drops. Cortisol decreases. Immune function rebounds. This is why Pennebaker's early studies showed immune improvement. Not because writing has magical healing properties, but because stopping the suppression frees up immune resources that were being consumed by the biological cost of secrecy. The second mechanism is the narrative construction and memory reconsolidation. This is the deeper mechanism, and it connects to Wednesday's Scholars Fire episode. Traumatic memories are stored differently from ordinary memories. Ordinary autobiographical memories are processed through the hippocampus, which organizes them into coherent narratives with temporal sequence. Beginning, middle, end, causation, this happened because of that, and contextual embedding, this happened then, in that place, and it's over now. These narratives are filed, integrated into your life story in a way that makes them accessible but not intrusive. Traumatic memories, when they overwhelm the hippocampal processing capacity, are stored in a more fragmented form, dominated by the amygdala-mediated sensory and emotional data, flashes of image, surges of feeling, body sensations without context. These fragments aren't filed. They remain in an unprocessed state, which means the amygdala continues to treat them as ongoing threats rather than past events. This is the neurological basis of PTSD flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, and hypervigilance. Expressive writing forces the hippocampus to do what it couldn't do during the traumatic event: construct a coherent narrative. When you sit down and write, "This happened, and then this happened, and I felt this because of that," you're actively building the causal, temporal, and emotional structure that transform fragmented amygdala data into integrated hippocampal narrative. Recent neuroscience of memory reconsolidation supports this. When a stored memory is reactivated, retrieved and brought into conscious awareness, it enters a temporarily unstable state during which it can be modified before being restored. Writing about a traumatic memory reactivates it, and then provides new narrative context during the reconsolidation window. The memory isn't erased, it's updated, filed with context, causation, and temporal markers that tell the amygdala, this happened in the past. It's over. You can stand down. The third mechanism is cognitive restructuring through language. Pennebaker's later research revealed something remarkable about which writers improved most. Using computational text analysis, his program LIWC, Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count, pronounced Luke, he found that the people who showed the greatest health improvements weren't those who wrote the most emotionally intense entries. They were those whose language shifted across the 4 days. Specifically, successful writers showed 2 patterns. First, they shifted in perspective, starting with I-focused language, describing their own viewpoint in early sessions, moving to he, she, they oriented language in middle sessions, just considering other perspectives, then returning to I language with new understanding. This cycle of perspective taking mirrors the cognitive flexibility that characterizes healthy psychological processing. Second, successful writers increase their use of causal and insight words over the 4 days. Words like because, reason, realize, understand, think, and consider. These words indicate the construction of coherent explanation. The writer is building a story, not just venting an emotion, but making sense of it. This is the critical distinction between expressive writing and simple venting. Venting is emotional discharge without structure. It can feel cathartic in the moment, but doesn't produce the narrative integration that drives lasting health improvement. Expressive writing requires the construction of meaning, and that construction is the therapeutic ingredient. The fourth mechanism is extinction of conditioned emotional responses. Each time you write about a traumatic experience, approaching it deliberately in a safe environment without the feared consequences materializing, you are performing a version of what psychologists call exposure. The feared stimulus, which is the memory, is activated or reactivated through writing in the absence of the feared outcome, catastrophe, judgment, or rejection. Over repeated exposures, 4 days, the conditioned emotional response, anxiety, shame, panic, weakens. This is extinction learning, the same mechanism that underlies systematic desensitization in clinical anxiety treatment. The writing page provides an ideal exposure context, private, controlled, time-limited, and entirely within the writer's control. You can stop at any moment. You can destroy the writing afterward. Safety of the container allows the nervous system to learn that the memory can be approached without catastrophe. The ancient traditions and modern science describe the same phenomenon from different angles. Indigenous storytelling traditions understood that the communal witnessing of a difficult narrative transforms it, not by changing the facts, but by changing the relationship between the narrator and the experience. The story moves from private burden to shared human experience. The community absorbs some of the weight. The narrator is no longer alone with it. Pennebaker's protocol achieves something similar, but with the page as the witness instead of the community. The act of writing externalizes the experience. It moves from purely internal, formless, embodied weight to external, shaped, linguistic form. The page doesn't respond, but it receives. In that reception, the experience of having expressed the unspeakable without catastrophic consequences is enough to trigger the reconsolidation, the inhibition release, and the extinction learning that drives the health improvements. Marcus Aurelius's nightly journaling achieved both cognitive restructuring, building philosophical frameworks for understanding difficulty, and perspective shifting, the constant movement between personal experience and Stoic principle. The Jewish ethical will achieves narrative construction and meaning-making across a lifetime of experience. What neuroscience adds to these traditions is specificity. We can now identify the hippocampal narrative construction process, the memory reconsolidation window, the cortisol reduction, and the immune markers that change. We can measure what the traditions felt, and the measurements confirmed the intuition. Here's your complete expressive writing protocol. 4 days, 15 minutes each. You begin tonight. What you need, a pen and paper. What you need, a pen and paper. Handwriting is preferred over typing. The motor involvement of handwriting engages additional neural pathways, a timer, a private space where you won't be interrupted. That's it. The protocol. For day 1, set your timer for 15 minutes. Write continuously about the most traumatic, upsetting, or deeply emotional experience of your life, or the experience that is weighing on you most heavily right now. It doesn't have to be the biggest trauma. It has to be the one that lives in your body, the one your thoughts keep circling back to, the one that tightens your chest or floods you with shame or sadness when it surfaces. Follow Pennebaker's original instruction. Write about your deepest thoughts and feelings about that experience. Let yourself go and touch those deepest emotions and thoughts. You might tie your topic to your relationships with others, parents, lovers, friends, relatives. You might link your experience to your past, your present, or your future, or to who you have been, who you would like to be, or who you are now. Don't worry about spelling, grammar, punctuation, or sentence structure. This is not a performance. Nobody will ever read this unless you choose to show them. If you run out of things to say, repeat yourself. Circle back. Go deeper. If you cry, that's okay. If you feel nothing, that's okay too. When the timer goes off, stop. Close the notebook. Day 2, same protocol. 15 minutes. You can write about the same experience or a different one. Pennebaker's research shows that most people return to the same topic and go deeper each day. Today, notice if your perspective starts to shift. You may find yourself writing about the experience from a slightly different angle, considering what another person involved might have been feeling, or seeing the event within a larger context. Day 3, same protocol, 15 minutes. By day 3, many writers report that causal language starts appearing spontaneously. I think this happened because, or I'm starting to realize that, or the reason this affected me so much was. This is the cognitive restructuring mechanism activating. You're not just feeling the experience anymore, you're building a story about it. And that story is the medicine. Day 4, final session, 15 minutes. Today, try to bring the narrative toward integration. What have you learned? How has this experience shaped who you are? What meaning, even provisional, even incomplete, can you extract from it? You don't need resolution. You don't need a happy ending. You need structure, a beginning, a middle, and at least the sense that the experience exists within a timeline, that it happened then, that you survived it, and that you are writing about it now from a different vantage point. When the timer goes off, close the notebook. What to do with the writing? Keep it or destroy it. Both are valid. Pennebaker's research shows that the therapeutic benefit comes from the act of writing, not from the product. Some people find it cathartic to burn or shred the pages, a ritual of release. Others keep them as a record of a processing journey. Choose what feels right. Important. You do not need to share your writing with anyone. The health benefits in every study occurred without anyone reading the participants' writing. The page is the witness. That's enough. Timing guidance. Minimum 4 consecutive days, 15 minutes each. This is the validated protocol. It's an ongoing practice. After the initial 4 days, you can use expressive writing as a tool whenever a new emotional burden accumulates. Pennebaker recommends periodic writing sessions during life transitions, losses, or sustained stress. Some people incorporate a weekly or monthly 15-minute session as maintenance. Even before appointments, Pennebaker specifically suggests having therapy clients write about their most pressing issues for 10 minutes before appointments. This focuses the session and allows deeper, faster entry into meaningful material. Here are some prompts for each day, optional, that you can use only if you need help starting. Day 1 prompt could be, the experience I keep returning to, the one that lives in my body, is. Day 2 prompt could be, when I think about this experience from another person's perspective in it, I notice. Day 3 prompt could be, I'm starting to understand that this happened because, and the reason it affected me so deeply was. Day 4 prompt. What this experience has taught me, or is still teaching me, about who I am is. Here are some safety considerations. Expressive writing can temporarily increase emotional distress during and immediately after writing sessions. This is normal and expected. You are deliberately approaching difficult material. Research consistently shows that short-term distress is followed by longer-term improvement. However, if you have a history of severe trauma, PTSD, active suicidal ideation, or are in a mental health crisis, please practice expressive writing under the guidance of a trained therapist. This protocol is powerful, but it is not a substitute for professional care when professional care is needed. If writing about a particular topic feels genuinely overwhelming, not just uncomfortable but destabilizing, you can step back. Write about a different topic. Reduce the intensity. You are in control of the depth. The practice should feel like approaching the edge, not falling over it. If you find that expressive writing brings up material that you need support processing, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional. Here are some common mistakes in troubleshooting. Mistake 1 is treating it like a diary entry. Expressive writing is not, Dear Diary, today I went to the store. It requires emotional depth. You must go to the place that hurts. The benefits come from confronting the difficult material, not from documenting daily life. Mistake 2 is editing while writing. The moment you stop to fix a spelling error or improve a sentence, you've shifted from emotional processing mode to performance mode. The inner editor is the enemy of expressive writing. Write ugly, write messy, write wrong. The page doesn't grade. Third mistake is writing the same thing in the same way for 4 days. Pennebaker's research is clear. The writers who improve are those whose language shifts across days, perspective, in causal complexity, and insight language. If you're writing the identical narrative on day 4 that you wrote on day 1, you're venting, not processing. Let the story evolve. Let new angles appear. Follow the because and the I realize. Mistake 4 is sharing too quickly. The impulse to show your writing to someone immediately, a partner, friend, a therapist, can short circuit the processing. The act of writing for yourself is the mechanism. Sharing introduces social dynamics. How will they react? Will they judge me? Am I seeking validation? That pulls you out of the internal processing space. If you want to share eventually, wait until the 4 days are complete. Fifth mistake is expecting to feel better immediately. Most participants feel worse in the hours after writing, sadder, more emotionally raw, more tender. This is the exposure effect. You just deliberately approach something painful. The healing happens in the days and weeks after the protocol, as the narrative integration settles and the immune system rebounds. Don't judge the practice by how you feel at 6 p.m. on day 1. Judge it by how you feel in a month. Sixth mistake is thinking the writing has to be good. There is no good or bad in expressive writing. There's only honesty. Pennebaker's analysis shows that literary quality has zero correlation with health outcomes. What correlates is emotional depth and cognitive processing, causal and insight language. Write like no one will ever see it, because no one has to. Here's your assignment. Begin the 4-day expressive writing protocol this weekend. Day 1 tonight, day 2 tomorrow, days 3 and 4 at the start of the week. 15 minutes, a pen and paper, a private space, a timer. The most emotionally significant experience you're carrying right now. Track this. After each session, rate your emotional intensity on a scale of 1 to 10. Don't try to reduce it, just note it. Over 4 days, most people see a pattern. Intensity peaks on day 1 or 2, then begins to settle as the narrative structure builds. Bonus observation is after each session, write one sentence, separate from the main writing, that captures any insight or shift in perspective that emerged. Just one sentence. Over 4 days, these sentences often reveal the arc of processing more clearly than the writing itself. Share your experience without sharing your content in the watering hole on Telegram. How did it feel? When did the shift happen? What did day 4 feel like compared to day 1? Expressive writing occupies a distinct and powerful place in the Wired 8 ritual toolkit, where breathwork practices, cyclical sighing, box breathing, work bottom up, from body to brain, modulating the autonomic nervous system to shift cognitive state. Expressive writing works top down and inside out. It begins with language, the highest cognitive function, and uses the act of narrative construction to reorganize the way emotional memory is stored in the brain. It changes the filing system. It moves fragments from the amygdala's emergency inbox to the hippocampus's organized archive. Wednesday's Scholar Fire explored grief as science. The idea that grief is not a disorder to be medicated, but a biological process that requires completion. Expressive writing is one of the most evidence-based tools for allowing that completion. It doesn't bypass the grief. It gives the grief a structure, a beginning, a middle, and eventually the possibility of a next chapter. For Sylvester listeners, the implications extend to financial decision-making. Unprocessed emotional experiences create cognitive noise that biases decisions. Investors carrying unresolved grief, anger, fear, or shame are measurably more reactive, more impulsive, and more vulnerable to cognitive distortions. Expressive writing reduces that noise, not by eliminating the emotions, but by integrating them into a coherent narrative that the prefrontal cortex can work with instead of around. When Ritual OS launches in August 2026, expressive writing will be available as a structured 4-day protocol with daily prompts, a timer, and optional tracking for emotional intensity and insight language, bringing Pennebaker's 40-year-old protocol into a modern ritual architecture. So, 3 points. 1. Expressive writing, 15 minutes, 4 consecutive days, writing about your deepest thoughts and feelings about a significant emotional experience. This is the most studied writing intervention in psychology, with over 200 peer-reviewed studies showing benefits ranging from halved healthcare visits to improved immune function to faster wound healing. 2. It works by forcing narrative construction, moving fragmented emotional memory from amygdala storage to hippocampal integration, while simultaneously releasing the physiological cost of emotional suppression. 3. You need a pen, a page, a timer, and 15 minutes of honesty. That's all. The page is the witness, the story is the medicine, the structure is the healing. Start tonight. Follow The Wired Ape on Instagram and X. Visit thewiredape.com for the full ritual entry library and the downloadable one-page protocol guide. Head to Sylvester.com. Join the watering hole on Telegram. Come back Monday for the next Mismatch Monday. Be kind to your Wired Ape brain. And when it's carrying something it can't speak, let it write.